Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kenor, the Tiger Writes, and Todd, Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing chapter 47. Tibs moaned as he bit into the fried potato and the meat's juice within it poured into his mouth. He couldn't believe how good this was. You have to try this. He told Jackal, who watched him, shaking his head sadly. This is really worth a silver. If Crow heard you say that, Tibs, his heart would break. Like everyone around him, Jackal had a shadow within him. Secrets, Tibs figured. He had many in a varying density. He wasn't... I haven't caught myself doing that one often, but I still do it. He wasn't sure what that represented. How important they were? Not if he tries this, Tibbs replied. He didn't know how he did this. It was more like with how he sensed his essence in people. He could actively stop, but he didn't need to be using the essence for it to happen. He'd had a broth at the inn once they returned. He'd wanted a full meal, but Karina had said no. She'd said that when they came back from their audience, clerics only ate broth for a day or two so they could get used to food again. She must have told that to Cosette because this morning you would only serve him broth again. Fortunately, she was busy with her training right now, so Tibbs headed for another booth as he ate the fried potatoes and meat. He had a tankard of a sweet ale, then a pastry that was so sweet it hurt his teeth. He still ate it, but decided he wasn't having that again. He had roasted meats on sliced so thin light shone through when he raised it against the sun. Meat in cubes wrapped in sour leaves, fruit dried in salt or sugar, or marinated in wine, and even some in vinegar. Those were surprisingly tasty. Slow down, Jekyll said. You're going to spend all your coins this way if you don't make yourself sick first. They shrugged, pressing a copper on the counter in exchange for fried balls of sweet dough. There were enough people around, no one missed a copper here and there, or if they did, they'd think they'd spent it without noticing. The merchant and the bazaar were good at extracting more coins than those buying from them intended. What do you think our darknesses... Okay, this is where I need to... What do you think is darkness's echo? He asked the fighter, offering him one of the balls. He looked around as Krosef might catch him, enjoying someone else's food and bit into it. Clerics, I guess. Tim shook his head. He'd consider that, but it's just Condor. There have to be others. The world's too big for Purity to be able to hold sway over all of it. Even the guild doesn't control it entirely, and there's a lot more of them. There's a lot more of them than there are Purity's cleric. But darkness had implied Tibbs could locate them, and that there was more than one. Okay, but if it isn't the cleric, what would it be? Jekyll shrugged, popping the rest of the ball in his mouth. Anything dark, I guess. Chewed and swallowed. These are just okay. I'm sure Crow could make better ones if he tried. I'd eat all of them. Tibbs agreed. He'd eat everything he could find from now on. He was not going hungry ever again unless he had no other choice. And it can't be just something dark. He stepped around a noble. Her throat's dark, but that doesn't make it a representative. It doesn't make it an echo. That doesn't make it an echo. He ran to a booth selling candies and placed his new coin on it. It was silver. Do you have any sea drops? He asked. Never heard of them, the thin merchant answered. They're sweet and salty, hard, but when they melt in your mouth, it's like the foam on the shore looks like. Sorry, kid, that doesn't sound like anything I have. Something sour and sweet then. It's orange. I prefer the chewy kind. You know what you like? And then smiled and pulled a box from the shelf of them at the back of the booth. I was wondering what other candies were in them. Maybe he should come by during the night and see. Claudia was still weak, and Taurus hadn't turned. Would give him a lot of darkness to hide in, even with torches and lantern hanging everywhere. He loved how weak light was in those times. Kid, the merchant called. Are these what you want? Light was weak in the night. He looked up. The sun was still hours away from its zenith. Is that when it was the strongest? Only darkness hadn't said when light was strong, but when its echo were at their weakest. Did one mean the other? Still hadn't worked out what their echoes were. Still hadn't worked out what the echoes were. Until he did, he wouldn't be able to work it out. Yeah, that's twice. He wouldn't know. Tibs, Jekyll said, placing hand on his shoulder. Maybe you've eaten enough. I'll take all of them, he hurried to say. How many? A silver's worth. Merchant raised an eyebrow, then scooped candies out and put them in the counter before taking the silver coin. Tibs grabbed them and walked away. What were darkness's echoes? What were darkness's echoes? Didn't even haggle this time, Jekyll complained. You could have gotten more from that silver. Tibs shrugged and popped the candy in his mouth and fought not to spit it out. That was far sour than he'd expected or tasted before in a candy. Now I'm thinking he passed you the stuff he can't sell, since you weren't actually paying attention. It's not that bad, he answered and fought not to make a face. Was there any sweetness in there? And I thought I was a horrible liar. Tibs walked the roofs. It wasn't his usual time, the sun being up, but he needed to ponder darkness's riddle, and he always thought better when he walked the roofs. Light and darkness. One saw lies, the other sought secrets. They weren't exactly opposite in what they did, but around him, they didn't mesh well. Darkness got stronger when the light was weak, and weaker when when there was more light. He cursed as the realization hit him at the same time as his foot slipped off the roof's peak. Then he was stepping on ice to avoid falling and looking up, shielding his eyes. The sun was high. How did he know if it was at its zenith? He'd know because it would be when there was the least amount of shadows cast by object. Shadows. They were darkness's echoes, and the zenith was the right time. All he had to do was look directly at light, and he could have his audience. He looked around for a shadow and didn't see any. Not even the chimney cast one. He stepped back to the roof, absorbing his essence, and walked around it. The sliver there was so thin it might be in his imagination. He had it. He knew how to go about having his audience. Now all he had to do was go hungry again. He cursed. Only gotten to enjoy food for one day. It wasn't fair he had to give it up again. Glad of the sun. When I see you, we're going to talk about this need for me to go hungry all the time. I don't force you to do anything, a man said, and Tibs spun, then looked down to make sure he wasn't about to lose his footing. The roof was gone. The town was gone. It was all light. It was only light. Yeah. The roof was gone. The town was gone. All there was. Actually, no, all was light. He looked at the form he could just make out. Harry? No, I'm not Harry. The form sounded a lot like the guard leader. You're light. How is it possible? I didn't do the strong emotion thing. And who told you such is the only way to reach me? Tib shrugged. Light already knew, since it knew what he was in his mind. It seemed that Jenny didn't know as much as she thought about how to get an audience. He shouldn't be surprised if she was as young as he figured she was. How much has been lost, Light said. Much has been lost, Light said. Much has been distorted. Then how do I do it? You do it the way that works. That's not helpful. Did you come seeking me for help? No. Tibbs admitted and looked at the form. He was certain looked more like Harry than before. Now you look like him. I am what you make of me. So that isn't because you like him? Commodore said he was almost like a cleric in how he worked for you. Like is a term of the living. It is not something I, nor my brethren, have. He is but one of many who have had his audience and who I accepted. Then why does he act like you're everything to him? My teacher says that the elements influence how we think. Maybe believing some of his choices are taken away provide him with comfort. The living are interesting in different ways. Like you, putting yourself through so much. And for what? Water said I need to do this. No. Child of Human Water did not. Don't let falsehood cloud your sight. You will find that it is a poor way to be when you desire to wield me. I do not take away the choices you are in the living, but you are with me, and here I have rules. You will obey them. Tibbs nodded. Sorry, like that water said. I need to get the audience if I want the rest. He looked at Light and tried to make out the shadow. But while the shape was like Harry, that was all it was, a shape of light within more light. Why do you want it? Why do you put yourself through this for it? 2. The word caught in his throat as if a block had appeared to stop them. No lies, child of human. Again, the protest was preventing from leaving his throat. I'd watched him, what Tibbs thought was amusement. Tibbs orders his thought. I want the power to avenge Mama, he said, then hurried to add, but also to protect my friends. Yes, humans more than most of the living are complex in their motivation. It is what makes you so interesting. You don't mind that I'm going to hurt people? This expected someone about truth and rules to be against him doing something bad with what they gave him. What you do with what I grant you is up to you. You will be the one to endure the consequences of your action. But you, child of human, need to bear in mind that you are not like most. You have taken on far greater responsibility. You will not bear my essence only, but that of all of us. That will exact a price on you. Multiple, in fact. I'm okay with that. Water had implied as much. The chuckle didn't come from the form, but all around him. Only because you don't know what it will be. Are you going to tell me? No. It isn't our place to tell you. It is something for you to discover, should you survive that long. He's waited for them to say more, focusing on the form, trying to make out the shadow among all this light. Can't you just give it to me? He asked when he still didn't make anything out after a few minutes. That isn't how I work, how any of us should work. He looked up at the approach in the word. But not all of us do things how they should be done. We are much like those outside in that way. Just rub this face. This is going to take a while then. I can barely make you out. I definitely can't see anything. How do you expect me to find it like this? You can see, Light said. You simply refuse to look. You believe you know the truth of what I am, and that limits you. And how about you tell me how I'm wrong? That would be helpful. It is, but only if you understand it. He declared at the forum, do you all enjoy being obtuse? He paused and frowned at the word. Where had he heard it? Where had he learned it? It sounded like one Alistair or Karina would know. Either had either explained it to him. It seems confusing, Light said while Tibbs was silent. because you are limiting your understanding. Tibs closed his eyes, but light poured through his eyelids. What did he know? What was he certain of? The shadow is inside you. That is correct. He looked at the form, stared at it hard enough, spots formed at the edge of his vision. With an exasperated cry, he threw his arm up. I can't see it. You're so cursed bright. I can't see anything but those damn spots. Light watched him impassively. Tibs kept himself from screaming at Light. It wouldn't care. And he wouldn't be able to think. What did he know? What was he certain of? He'd gotten the shadow from the others through trickery. No, more taking advantage of the situation that had presented itself. Fire and corruption were the exceptions. Fire, because Tibs was dying, and they were too eager to see what he'd do with it, and corruption for he hadn't worked out that time. He'd said because they were friends, but could he cross that? 2 out of 6 he hadn't tricked. Light said each had their reasons for doing what they did, just like Air hadn't simply wanted to test him, or give him the shadow, she'd wanted to play. Chuckled, and she'd been willing and she'd been winning until he worked out how to control his fall and surprise her. She'd said something. Tibs looked around. Light was everywhere, everything, except for those spots he was still seeing. The light was everything. He groaned. All of this is you. But yes, he tricked himself again. When was he going to stop ignoring what he'd already been told? If he was inside Light, he couldn't only look at the form to find the shadow. It could be anywhere. He looked around and almost missed it because it was the one spot among all those he saw. Because there was only one spot among those he saw. Only this one didn't move with the others. Light had been right. He'd seen it. He just hadn't been looking. He grabbed it, and the shadow melded into him, a new reserve pushing itself between Air and corruption. Well done. Was that pride in their voice? And this concludes chapter 47. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to read the story, you can do that on Royal Road. If you want to support me, that's Patreon, where you can read ahead of the story, as well as everything I've written. And if you want to watch me record these live, it's on Twitch every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The rest of the week, I write. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.